All right, we are here with Greg Hand, Unearthing Cincinnati's Bizarre Past, a new segment we're going to be doing here on the 3 a.m. Coney, talking about all of the absurd, weird things that happened in Cincinnati that no one has ever heard of. And you are kind of an expert. You are obsessed with the past of Cincinnati. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, yeah. I thought I would engage a little bit when I retired from the University of Cincinnati about 6 years ago, and it's become an obsession.
Yeah.
I spend more time reading the Daily Gazette from 1870 than I do reading the newspapers today.
Keeping up with uncurrent times.
That's about it.
Yeah, and I liked what you said. You said you called yourself the myth buster of Cincinnati, keeping the weird soul of Cincinnati alive.
Yeah, the whole path that I'm trying to clear here by doing research has to do with this myth that Cincinnatians tell themselves. They tell themselves that this is a very polite town. It's a very conservative town. It's a very well-behaved town. And that we all cheer for the Reds and we all eat Grater's ice cream and eat Skyline. And if you look not too far back in our history, this was a pretty weird place. And, you know, you've got stuff like whales trapped in aquariums up on top of Mount Auburn. And you've got witch trials going on, and you've got public hangings, and all sorts of wonderful things going on here.
All sorts of wonderful things. That Cincinnati is still pretty weird, but we definitely have a nice little coating of we're just terrible
veneer.
sports and yeah.
This veneer of civilization.
That's right. All right. Well, what do we want to talk about today? What do you got for us?
Well, since we're in Cincinnati, let's talk about breweries. Let's talk about beer. And this is one where, it's getting to the point where you feel left out if your street does not have a brewery these days.
Oh, yeah.
There's breweries everywhere.
So many.
And for a while in Cincinnati, there were very large breweries, many very large breweries. And, you had the world-class breweries like Moreline and Windish and those sorts of things. But you also had a lot of mid-level breweries that still turned out hundreds of thousands of gallons, Lackman's and Sohn's and all these breweries. And what a lot of people don't remember about these breweries is they operated before OSHA. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration. These breweries were run to make beer, and they were not run for the convenience necessarily of the people who worked in the breweries, most of whom, by the way, were drunk.
While doing their entire job.
Because every brewery had like a quota of beer that you could imbibe while you were working. And in some places it was totally unlimited. They would set a beer keg up and all the workers could drink the beer. And when that keg was empty, they rolled another one out. Other places they had a quota system depending on the job that you had and how old you were, how much beer you could drink. But they all had enough beer that you shouldn't be operating heavy machinery, and you were operating heavy machinery. One of the ways that people died was from the beer itself. The fermentation was going on.
Yeah. And
when a beer vat exploded, which was not uncommon, people died. At the Herman Lackman Brewery, for instance, back in 1892, a 1,200 gallon beer cask exploded, and it didn't just kill people in the brewing area, it killed a bookkeeper.
Oh,
So I'm
wow.
pretty sure that the bookkeeper did not have his desk set up next to the 1,200 gallon beer,
1,200 gallons. Wow, exploded.
you know, and so beer itself was kind of dangerous. Then you've got the fact that to get the beer going, you've got to cook it, you've got to boil it,
Mm-hmm.
and so when you're bringing the hops into the vat to cook and on that sort of thing, what they used to do is just throw a board on top of the vat, and some guy would walk out on this board and start raking hops in on top of boiling beer.
Oh,
And so in 1874, there's a guy named John Geiler who fell into one of these vats
ooh.
while the rest of the crew was out at lunch.
Mm.
So he was able to pull himself out of the scalding hot vat at about the time people came back from lunch and found him lying there like a cooked lobster. And
Oh,
he,
what a
he
way to come
died
back
like
from
2 hours
lunch.
later.
Wow. Wow. Geiler Ale.
So those sorts of things. Have you gone on the tunnel tour?
I have not yet. That's actually still on my bucket list, is to go
Okay,
on the
so
tunnel tour.
yeah, so if you go to over Rhine
Mm-hmm.
and you get down into the tunnels and that sort of thing, one of the things that you discover is that they have holes cut in the floor to go down into the cellars.
Mm-hmm.
And a combination of poor lighting, slippery floors, and the fact that most of the workers were drunk meant that it was a regular occurrence for people to just fall through the holes into the
Yeah.
cellars. So you'd be hauling in a couple of hogsheads and make a wrong step and you're down in there.
Just tripped while hauling in a couple hogsheads.
No,
Happens
you
all the time.
and
Happens
it
all the
wasn't just the people who worked in the brewery. Where um, there are cases where police officers
time.
patrolling in the area um, decided that they heard something suspicious. I think what they heard that was suspicious was beer dripping, that they
Ah,
might get a midnight sip. But police officers going into breweries and falling through these open holes, you know.
wow.
So so we had that kind of stuff. The other thing is machinery. We're talking roughly 1870 to around World War I when Prohibition came in. Machinery wasn't designed to be particularly safe.
Mm.
It was designed to be effective, and so they had things like ice making equipment, and you read many reports of people getting sprayed with sub-freezing ammonia
Oh,
from these ice making machines
that's what a way to
and
go.
and succumbing, or even just the machine blows up and like a valve goes sailing across. There was a guy named Joseph Leinhardt um, who back in the early 1900s
Mm-hmm.
had essentially the top of his head removed by a valve from one of these ice making machines sailing off there. And then they would do these wonderful things like run the machinery next to a stair that did not have a guardrail. And
Okay.
so breweries um, were basically like supply shops for farmers
Mm.
because the grain, after it had been processed and turned into beer and all that, the farmers would come down and load this stuff up and carry it away. The brewers got rid of all this stuff, and the farmers got free feed for their cattle, and so there was a report of a guy named Peter Hensler, who was a farmer out in Green Township on the west side of town, came
Hmm.
into the Gherke Brewery. This is right where Central Parkway bends. As you're heading into town on Central Parkway, it bends and starts heading eastward. Right
Yeah.
there at the bend was the Gherke Brewery. And Peter Hensler brought his wagon in to get this leftover grain from the Gherke Brewery, was walking down some steps, and he's wearing one of these long duster jackets
Oh,
that they have in Tombstone, right?
yeah.
And the tail of his jacket gets caught in a gear running on the side of the step, and it yanks him off the step and starts pounding him against the wall of the brewery. And basically, they had to send pieces of him back home.
Oh. Oh, I mean, these breweries back in the 1870s to 1920s were just like adult funlands, get drunk and try not to die factories.
That's about it.
That's
That is really about it. You showed up for work, you quaffed a few and quaffed all day, and then operated machinery that did not have guards on it.
yeah. Wow. Wow. That is crazy. A million ways to die in a Cincinnati brewery.
Yeah, you
Gotta,
don't often think about skulls and crossbones when you're looking at the old Moorline bottles.
yeah, but you do.
But I do.
You do. You grab a beer and you go, I wonder how many people die.
And then, that was just in the brewery.
Yeah.
Once the beer's done, you've got to deliver it. Okay. And you're delivering it, they did not have sobriety tests for the people who were on these delivery wagons. This is like the Budweiser Clydesdales. You had very large horses, very
Nice.
large wagons,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes things would roll off the wagon accidentally. Sometimes people would drop things as they were unloading them. Many reports of people pulling a barrel off and dropping it and breaking their leg. There are reports of children playing around with the beer wagons, wondering what happens if we open the gate and getting squished on the cobblestones.
Getting squished.
So
that's a good way to.
Beer-related fatalities in Cincinnati were a pretty common occurrence.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I would hope we have less of those now with safety precautions. I think at the bare minimum, if you're creating machines for a factory, they should not blow up and kill people. There should be a range there of acceptability of safety precautions.
And it is one of those things where they have a wonderful archive at the University of Cincinnati of birth and death records. And wow. And you can go there and search for almost anything on these records. And so you search for brewery, you search for beer, you come up with all these amazing deaths, and the kind of thing where somebody is clearly injured fatally.
Yeah,
they could tell right away. Okay, beer barrel rolled over him and he's pretty flat, so he's going to die. They don't take you to the hospital.
No,
they take you home.
Oh.
Knock at the door. Mrs. Smith, we got Mr. Smith here. He's going to die. So could you put him in a nice place? And
is this your half flattened husband?
That's right.
He's very drunk. He can't feel a thing.
Get the last words done.
Wow, that is crazy. Pre-prohibition back there in the late 1800s. So you probably have dozens more of stories of beer-related deaths in Cincinnati. we could do a monthly segment of this.
Segment, just the beer death of the day.
Beer death of the day. Just I don't know if that's going to make people feel better about their day or they're just going to avoid going outside or going anywhere near breweries. It's fine. They're safer now. You're not going to be flattened and sent home.
And I haven't even begun on fires.
Oh, we can do a whole segment on fires.
Just on the fires.
Just on the fires.
And then, the pièce de résistance is armed insurrection. Okay, so if you live in Cincinnati, especially if you've been up the northern end of over the Rhine, kind of near Moorlines up there, or no, Rheingeist up there near Rheingeist now. You will see the Metal Blast building. It faces McMicken Avenue.
Okay.
It had a big fire itself just a couple of months ago, but on the front of the building it says Metal Blast. Used to be a kind of a pirate heavy metal venue or hardcore venue. A lot of bands used to put on shows.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I've never been there.
And but that is in fact the old Jackson Brewery. And back in the 1880s, a guy named Weber, who was, by all accounts, a very successful hotel manager, decided to buy that brewery and become a brewer.
Okay.
And he almost immediately ran it into bankruptcy. And they appointed a receiver. And he lobbied the court, which basically means he bribed the court to name the bankruptcy receiver as a good friend of his. And his plan was that even though it's technically in this guy's name, this guy will let me run my brewery. And it didn't work out that way. And the guy threw Weber off the property and whatever. And so it took several years, but Weber finally finagled back into the good graces of the court and was allowed to go to his brewery. And what he discovered is that when he sent his representative there, they were the brewers who worked there really liked the new guy. They didn't want to go back to the old guy. So they trapped the representatives of Weber in the brewery office and formed an armed guard to keep anybody from rescuing him.
What?
They locked him into an office that had a telephone. And apparently the brewers weren't real familiar with telephones, so they were kind of surprised that Weber called down to his lawyer, who went down to some of the tougher streets in Cincinnati and started passing out $5 bills and said, grab your gun and come on up. We're going to rescue Jackson Brewery. And so this informally deputized armed mob shows up at Jackson Brewery and chases the brewers into the basement of the brewery. They get down into the tunnels and the word starts spreading. They put bombs in here. They're going to blow them up and we're going to be stuck in here. Well, I think there was one stray shot. Some people got threatened with red hot pokers by the people who manage the furnaces, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The police eventually showed up, arrested a few people, but the armed insurrection was over. Nobody died on that one.
Wow, that is a great story. I was waiting for everyone to be decapitated or thrown into the gears of the machines.
Okay, I'll make up for it this way.
Okay.
The Jackson Brewery was immediately to the west of the old Bellevue Incline.
Okay.
Immediately to the east of the old Bellevue Incline was the old University of Cincinnati building that was demolished in 1930.
Hmm.
For about 20 years, that old UC building was a medical school, and they needed some place to store their bodies. And so they stored the bodies in the cellars at Jackson Brewery.
Oh, there you go.
So you'd go down into the cellars, and on this side, you got the lagering tanks, and on this side, you got the stiffs.
Wow. How long did that go on? That there was no
That was for about 30
precautions?
years. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. It's amazing that Jackson Brewery isn't still here doing the same thing with these absurd practices.
So, yeah, I happen to know the guy who owns it now,
Oh yeah.
and he claims it'll soon be renovated and into a nice event venue.
Awesome.
Maybe
Yeah.
a haunted event venue.
I would love a haunted brewery here.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. I would definitely go there and just make sure they're not still putting the beer right next to dead bodies. But I mean, an entire horror haunted brewery would be fantastic. I would love that. All right. Well, I think that is all that we have for this week. I want to thank you, Greg Hand, for coming on and talking about some of the weird, bizarre, absurd things that happened in Cincinnati's past. I hope you'll come back on, and everyone go follow Greg Hand's blog at Cincinnati Curiosities. Anything else you want to shout out?
No, that's it. Google Cincinnati Curiosities. You'll end up in the swamp.
End up in the swamp. Beautiful. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.